Okay, so today's meeting is with Stephanie Drenka of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, and also Amina Haji. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did?
Okay, great. And she is the founder of Austin Health Commons. And my name is Hannah, and I am the founder of Set Supper Club. And today we'll be in discussion about the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation model and community healing from racial and historical trauma in general. So I just wanted to start off by introducing everyone. In response to Amina's question beforehand, I started Supper Club when I was in a master's program at UT Austin. I was studying counselor education, and I had some internships internships, and one of them was at a psychiatric hospital, and I just saw that a lot of people were cycling back into the system, and I was wondering why, and I realized a lot of it had to do with just systemic difficulties, and then also language barriers, the hospital not really being able to serve multicultural populations very well, and then also like lack of resources, one, but also lack of somebody there to translate how to use resources or destigmatize it. So I wanted to start the Supper Club to highlight different local organizations, the work that they do, and kind of bridge a gap between who utilizes them and what they know about it. And I think that food, and we'll talk about food a little bit later today, but food and community are really great resources for building healing, building like safe, secure relationships. And the more that we invest in our community, the more we will want to participate in it. So that's my thing. But I was wondering if I could hear from both of you, who you are, what your background is, and how you got into this work. And I'll start with Stephanie first, if you don't mind.
Sure. Hi, my name is Stephanie Drenka, and I am the communications director for Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. And I got into this work, I think, because I was born in Korea and adopted by a very kind but very white family. So I grew up with a very clear understanding of racial differences and feeling like I didn't belong. But I didn't quite understand why. And then as I learned, through history and through education, the systemic reasons that I was different and experienced different things than my white family, it became part of my work to make sure that that changes at some point in our lifetime or after we're gone.
Thank you. And Amina, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, I'm Amina Haji. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a mother, social entrepreneur, and family physician. I got into this work for similar reasons as Stephanie. I guess it's all personal. I grew up in Bryan, Texas in the 1970s, and also very white neighborhood, white community. Black and brown people were on the other side of the railroad tracks, unfortunately, and also was very othered and exoticized. And made front page news in Bryan, Texas when we moved to town. Indians moved to town. My mom in her sari, big picture with a bun in her hair, cooks exotic food. So that was my first exposure, and it wasn't the most pleasant one of acceptance. And as a physician, it's so obvious the disparities in a Black man lives 10 years less than a white woman. A Black woman was 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. And I think that what is not in the view of enough of us are the systemic reasons, the systemic inequities and institutionalized racism. So it's my life's work to bring that into view, but also to heal and to understand that we are all of a shared fabric, a shared life force, a shared humanity. And skin color and ethnicity, yeah, they have a lot to do with who we are, and at the same time, they are not our essence.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Um, and also we have Chef Anna on the call. Uh, I know you have the video out, so I don't want to call you out, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free.
There's a lot of background noise from somebody.
Oh, am I not muted? Sorry, guys, that was me. We're in the car right now, and I just
Good
hopped
music.
on.
No problem.
So sorry.
No problem. Okay. Yeah, so we kind of got into a topic, but I think I wanted to highlight the background of why this particular project came about. And it was in a direct response to the shootings that happened in Atlanta a few months ago, where multiple Asian women were shot and died. And so I just wanted to highlight a lot of local AAPI community leaders were hurting. We've been talking privately, and then we kind of wanted to do something tangible to uplift our community, one, and then also highlight mental health organizations that have been doing the work and are very well equipped to do so more on a wider scale. So that's why we picked these truth, racial healing, and transformation organizations. And then some conversations that have come since the shooting is, I think there's been a lot of triangulation happening, and I'll get into the definitions a little bit. But with the Black Lives Matter movement, if we want to call it that, and the Stop Asian Hate, we've been pitted against each other a lot in the past few months, and those movements are not mutually exclusive, and we need to actually work together and break down stigma and have more open dialogue about why these triangulation relationships might occur. So we'll pick that from from Stephanie and Dr. or Amina. Okay. So before we get started into the discussion, I just wanted to go over some quick fire definitions of a few terms that we would use that might not be super familiar to a few of our listeners. So first, triangulation. This often occurs to divide and conquer and manipulate to maintain some type of power or some type of power. And we use that as like a threat of exclusion. And it kind of is done with a lot of microaggressions, a lot of, gaslighting as well, of not validating each other's experiences. I don't know if I'm doing a great job of explaining this. Stephanie, did you have anything to add to the definition of triangulation?
I think when I think of triangulation, I think a lot of the middleman or the model minority, sort of the making somebody sort of the golden child at the expense of another to divert the attention from the real problem and the real perpetrators. But it's a harmful distraction and based on a lot of false stereotypes and myth.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, that's a great point, specifically within the AAPI community and the Black community. Historically, even given like the LA riots in the 90s, the Asian was used as the model minority of like, see, they work hard and they do this, like, why can't you be like them? And then a lot of triangulation between white populations, Black populations, and AAPI populations. And then next, intersectionality is a word that might come up as well. Just refers to simultaneous experiences across different social categories. So how your race and ethnicity, your gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, any of those components to your identity, how they overlap and interact with each other is called intersectionality. So being white in a woman is a different experience than being Asian in a woman. And so we need to look at the specific ways the different categories interact with each other. In terms of narrative therapy, this is something that we'll also use a lot, and we'll get more of a thorough definition later. But it's just a modality of therapy where we tell our stories and have some understanding of our experiences just by speaking to someone. It's also called talk therapy sometimes. And then we'll use our stories to make sense of our own experiences and find healing through that way. And then the last definition is historical trauma. And historical trauma will also get into more specific definitions. But an overall one is that there is intergenerational trauma that comes from what our ancestors experienced, and throughout generations, how that impacts the way that we grew up, the way that we view the world, potentially our values as well. But yeah, Dr. or Amina or Stephanie, did you have anything to add to any of those?
Those are great.
You taught me a lot, because I would say I've heard of all of them, except narrative therapy was new to me. And you defining triangulation was beneficial for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that feedback. So just to get started, Stephanie, a lot of people might not know what truth, racial healing, and transformation even is. So could you just tell us an overview of what it means to you?
Sure. Truth, racial healing, and transformation is quite a mouthful. It's hard to introduce myself and our organization and have people remember it. But basically, it was a framework designed by the Kellogg Foundation, who funded our organization in its sort of beginning stages. It's a 14-place initiative that they did where they picked different cities or locations in the US to test this framework that was modeled after truth and reconciliation commissions that have been done across the globe in areas after civil war or racial strife. Most well-known would be South Africa after apartheid. Nelson Mandela instituted TRCs to make sure that apartheid never happened again there. So it's based on that. So the truth is narrative change. It's understanding history, the truth, whose history is missing from the narrative, and making sure that we have an understanding of the harm that racism has caused. Then the racial healing, relationship building, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, pretty self-explanatory. And then the transformation came because the Truth and Reconciliation Commission sort of ended after the racial healing portion. And what Kellogg Foundation, in partnership with Dr. Gil Christopher, realized is that there needs to be transformation in terms of equitable policies and practices to make sure that racial equity is protected and that it continues after the work that we do. So that is what we do in all of our programming, and it sort of defines who we partner with, what initiatives we take on. And, I've just sort of modeled it in my daily life and relationships as well, just in terms of how do we heal from harms that we've done to each other, or that the system has done to us.
Yeah, and based off of my research of the TRHT model, is the Kellogg Foundation has like a very specific sites across the country, and Dallas is one of the unique ones. There's not many in the nation right now. So
Dallas was chosen. We actually petitioned for it to be here, and it wasn't one of their initial places until the 2017, where the police were shot during the protest downtown, and they realized that there was a lot happening in Dallas. And the more they sort of uncovered the history, they realized this is somewhere that racial healing has not happened, and we have not been telling the truth about racism.
And something to add to that, Hannah, when you talk about the places where there are TRHT centers, there is one that was funded at Austin Community College, the only community college where there was a funding. The rest were universities across the nation. As I understand, because the Kellogg Foundation leadership changed a little bit, and then the centers are not anymore as fully funded, or there's no new centers being developed. And this is important because if we as a community and we as people forever relied on foundations to fund or work that's needed in our communities, we will be at the whim of foundations. And it's amazing to have received the funding, yes, but the funding has to be sustained. And so the business model of it is important, meaning institutions, universities, corporations who want to embody a culture of truth, racial healing, and transformation must choose to do it and bring in organizations like ours to do it. And also community, we have to support the work or it will not be able to sustain itself. So just to mention that aspect, because Stephanie brought up the Kellogg Foundation, which sparked an amazing movement. And Dr. Christopher, I want to attribute to her as well.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think one of the things that we will talk about later is the importance of sustained, like, small recurring donations and the impact that that can have in comparison to like a big donation at one time. So like picking an organization that you believe in and even contributing $5-10 a month has a very big impact. But Stephanie, were you going to add to her comments?
Yeah, I was going to just elaborate that it was the Kellogg's investment into Dallas was only for a 3-year period. They've extended it a year with a little additional money, but fortunately, because we really relied on the community to drive this work, we were able to sustain and get funding even in larger amounts than Kellogg's initial donation. So it is important that we don't rely on one foundation and that our work can really speak for itself and live beyond the grant cycle.
Mhm.
And I had a follow-up question for you, Stephanie, before we move on to expanding on the TRHT model with Amina. But can you tell us if there is any difference between community healing, racial healing, or narrative healing?
So I think they're all related. Community healing is an important aspect of racial healing. Racial healing can be referring to individual healing or the community. So we define it with Kellogg's definition as a process that restores individuals and communities to wholeness, repairing the damage that is caused by racism. So racism at its core dehumanizes us. It makes people feel as though they're less than, or that people are more than. And so it's a process of healing those divides. The community healing is something that we all participate in, because at some level, racism has impacted and harmed every person in this country, or anyone that has touched it, even if they aren't directly the victim of it. It has a cost. And so community healing is acknowledging that and healing together. And the narrative healing is what we typically use. We follow the racial healing circles as our racial healing practices, which really is the sharing of stories, finding ways to unite and figure out what makes us similar and the commonalities that we share to remind each other of our humanity rather than what divides us. And it's also just an important component of being able to tell your own story and having that power, reclaiming that power from the people who have either excluded us from history or whitewashed the history or revised it. So all of them play a really important role together, I think.
Amina, I know that you modeled your programming after a few different models, not just strictly the TRHT one, but I read that you also incorporated the Food Commons model developed by Jamie Harvey. And I was wondering if you could explain to us how that impacted your work that you're doing now.
Yeah, we contextualize racial healing in the sphere of health and well-being. So I'm a medical doctor, and what I'm out for is healing, well-being, and vitality in the world for all people. And what we're out for is building a mindset. It's called conscious health and healthcare, because like Stephanie was saying, there's a lot of things when you talk about intergenerational racialized trauma, there's ways we learn, there's ways we think. When you talk about systems and structures, that's all embedded in our central processing unit of our brains. And so we have to shift our mindset. So we work at the level of mindset. And then we have a clinical center we're building. It's a 14,800 square foot health and wellness center in Central East Austin, where medical doctors will work side by side with a range of whole health practitioners, where it's accessible to all people, having insurance, sliding scale, all of this, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, but knowing that normally people with money, people without money, Black people, brown people, white people are not used to sharing spaces together. And so we use the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation model to ensure that we build community while we're building a center, and we overcome that perceived hierarchy of human value. And then the other level is the community level, where we know that unless we have ownership of our own health and we own the systems and structures and change them, we won't really transform or sustain anything. And we also know that only 20% of health outcomes happen in a clinical setting or a hospital setting. 80% is happening in our homes, in our neighborhoods, our schools. So in that context, we developed an Austin Health Commons. So it's a place where we come together, and it's the community that holds the mindset and works on the mindset. We work individually and collectively. It's the place where we create health in our schools, our neighborhoods, our workplaces. So, and it's also the place where we hold racial healing circles to spark a movement to achieve racial equity and eliminate racism. The Food Commons model, we've had amazing thought leadership and wonderful people help us. Jamie's my co-founder. I'm actually a co-founder of the Health Commons, which is a nonprofit. Jamie is a national thought leader, I would say. He started the Institute for Sustainable Future to think about what are sustainable ways of living where human beings are in balance with our Mother Earth and with one another. And out of his work also came the Food Commons, which is a movement out of Fresno, California, where it wants to make a food system sustainable and vertically integrated, where all people are participating equitably at every level. And in that model, the Food Commons is a public benefit corporation. So it's profit generating, but true to its mission. And then it's owned by a nonprofit. So after everybody gets paid, the people picking the fruits and the people distributing them and everybody gets paid, then the rest of the profits go back to the community, because it's the community nonprofit which owns this public benefit corporation. We love that model because right now we have a medical industrial complex where profits are the drivers of decision making, and we want to shift to a healthcare model, not a sick care model. And so it felt beautiful that our nonprofit community aspect would own at least a 51% share of the public benefit corporation, which is Carisha, the clinical center. And that way you have a thriving health center, people are getting well and healthy, they're connecting, and the profits of health and healthcare go back to community to create health, to achieve racial equity, to maybe fund the next center. So,
wow, that sounds amazing and incorporates a lot of my personal interest in like mutual aid funds. Like there's been a surge in free fridge programs and like community gardens. And I think that overall framework could be really helpful in terms of finding new interventions that can overlap all of that together. Thank you so much for that definition.
Do y'all do this, Stephanie?
Yeah.
I love the snaps. Nobody knows what I'm doing, but I guess they get the idea. And I figure if enough of us do it, it will catch on.
I always did it. I used to work with young spoken word poets. And so like at spoken word, it's always that something resonates.
Right. That's such a good, I forgot that. That was like in my 20s, 30 years ago.
I can't really do it well, but I'll do it in spirit just from my
Yeah,
together.
that's good enough.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the overall models that your programs are and your organizations are modeled after, but more specifically, I was wondering if you could tell us about the specific services you offer. So already you shared a little bit, but could you just give us a little bit more of a detail of like if somebody goes to Austin Health Commons, what does that process look like? How do they know what services to get?
Beautiful. You said Health Commons, so I'm guessing you're asking me right now.
Yes, sorry, Amina.
Yeah, so Health Commons right now, it's a very nascent organization. It's just 5 years old. We also got funded by a local foundation that's been amazing, St. David's Foundation, and should continue with that and are always working to build the community sustainership. The programs we offer are Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Circles. We hold those in partnership with the YMCA, with Austin Community College. We offer them at clinical settings, in university and corporate settings where people want to build that culture. We offer consultation services if you want to develop that culture more deeply and learn where the problems are in your organization. We can help organizations and corporations do that. And then we last year launched a COVID-19 relief program. This was the aspect of our work that creates health in its place. At the moment in time, what was needed for health was survival and food and money. And so we were able to get grant funding and served a few hundred families with food that was excess produce from local farms. Volunteers get it to community organizers and distribute it out into neighborhoods for food insecure families, and then just cash assistance for rent and utilities to families. In the racial healing, we've done about 50 circles and served about 1,000 people, connected about 1,000 people. I'd love to know what y'all have done, Stephanie, because I know it's way more extensive than ours. We launched our TRHT in 2018 when Dr. Christopher came to train our 14 racial healing practitioners. And the last is that we will launch in the next year is health where health happens. So we're starting with what we are seeing people want after the COVID pandemic. We're shifting from direct cash assistance to how do I keep my body healthy? How do I maintain baseline immunity so that I don't get COVID and so that I don't have other illnesses? So just health literacy. And the other is financial literacy. It's tough. A pandemic makes you realize, oh my gosh, do I have enough to survive if I lose my job or I can't go to work because I need to stay safe and take care of my elderly mom or whatever it is. We're launching financial literacy so that we can, in group settings, in circle settings, learn to make sure we know how to budget, save, even when you're on a paycheck to paycheck. Again, it's a mindset and practices that sometimes you just never learn to live more well with what you have.
Are these services for like financial literacy education done by case managers, or is it done in like seminars?
No, in fact, like I said, those we are gonna launch toward the end of this year, next year, but we believe very much in community. So we have a lot of community partners. Some are banks, some are small wealth management firms, some are individuals with the expertise to provide financial literacy. And we organize the people, they provide the services. And and then it can be in person, it can be virtual, it's all kinds of settings. And the creating health in its place, we already have our health center, Carisha, that's under construction. We have a providers community. So we have collaborating providers in the community, so many people that can provide that knowledge. And we generally try to partner up a medical doctor where, yeah, there might be some things I know, but there's a lot I don't know. Partner up with nutritionist, health coach, community health worker, with different kinds of practitioners that bring a different know-how and expertise.
Amazing. Stephanie, the same question for you. I know Amina was also very interested in how your services are organized and rolled out.
Okay, so our programming is very closely tied to the TRHT framework. So the first guiding principle that TRHT gave us was that there must be an accurate recounting of history. And so we knew that Dallas is ahistorical and definitely revisionist when it comes to talking about race and racism. So we are community driven, community informed. We hosted 11 community visioning sessions in partnership with the Dallas Public Library, where we opened them up to the community to come and tell their stories, the story of their people, sort of their experiences with racism, but also we asked them, what would Dallas look and feel like without racism? Like, what does that look like? What are we working towards? And then what do you think it'll take to get there? And so we partnered with SMU Core to evaluate this and compile all of the information, paired it with the history that we did and the research that we did about, for example, in the 1920s, 1 in 3 eligible men in Dallas, white men, were members of the KKK. That history is not often talked about. And so we compiled a lot of the histories, the lynchings that have happened, native removal and genocide and all of the slavery. And we had Japanese internment in Seagoville in Dallas County. So compiling that with the local history and people's stories before we even got to developing our programs. So the issues that bubbled up from those sessions were the history. People wanted to learn more and wanted their stories told, which is part of the narrative change. And then education and the economy were two of the main issues that kept coming up in those visioning sessions. So the racial healing, of course, similar to Amina, we had racial healing practitioners trained by Dr. Gil Christopher, and we host racial healing circles just for the general community in partnership with, for example, the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance started racial healing circles with us for caseworkers and social workers that work with the homeless population here. And then the transformation part, we took that idea of the economy and education, two really big institutions and systems. Like, how do we impact change on that larger scale besides the interpersonal? And Dallas has a lot of opportunities for individual leaders. So you can do Mayor Stars Council, Leadership ISC, Leadership Dallas. There's even been racial equity cohorts, but it's been individuals. So oftentimes individuals will go and experience and learn these things, then try to bring it back and implement it in their organizations without any buy-in from the rest of the organization. So a lot of times they either are unsuccessful, they're targeted at that point for trying to make change. A lot end up leaving those organizations. So we decided to try a pilot program, which we called Racial Equity Now, which we've completed our first year, which was sort of hybrid because we started in person and then went to virtual, and now we're in our second year. So the idea behind the Racial Equity Now cohort is finding organizations to participate from all of these different pillars that sort of fall into the framework: education, economy, city departments, smaller nonprofits like volunteer-led ones, youth organizations. And we made it so that in order to participate or be selected, you have to have a board member, you have to have the whole board sign off on it. But at every session, you have to have a board member, an executive leadership team member, and then someone that works directly with a community or direct service sort of provider. And they have to come to every session. It's a 9-month-long program. And in addition to sort of the general education and the Racial Equity Now training, they're also paired with a racial equity coach who offers them 60 hours for whatever they need. And we give them really specific asks. So they have to create a racial equity theory of change. They have to write a racial equity policy statement that acknowledges some of the harms that they've caused in the past with their organization. They have to do an assessment to figure out if they need to do more internal work or if they're ready to do some racial equity externally. And then they do a racial equity project, which we grant them $10,000 to do. So a lot of our funding goes right back into the community. So they have gone through that process, and then they have projects, and we hope that not only they are creating sort of that systemic change within their own structure, but they're working together and partnering with the other organizations in the cohort, holding each other accountable and sort of creating larger change. So we did it with 14 nonprofits. We modeled it again with nonprofits, and then we started a business cohort to target some of our corporate partners who are wanting to do this work. And then we are slowly expanding into Fort Worth. So that is the transformation side of things. And then the narrative change is my favorite part because I'm a communications nerd. So that is our history presentations, all the education that we provide on social media or at events. We also offer some specific programming around language and sort of going away from deficit-based language, how to talk about race and racism honestly. And then Transformation Tuesdays, which is something that we started programming during COVID, to talk about how race and racism is in everything. And so we target race, racism, and the intersections, race, racism, and the Asian American community and the arts community. And we did one on sports with Dale Hansen this week. So that's kind of an overview of our priorities right now.
Amina, you're muted.
I wanted to add something, Stephanie. I left this part off. It reminded me that you did the exercise, first of all, gathering the histories. That's so rich because so easy to think that happened somewhere else until you're like, oh, it happened right here and right here. And the envisioning, what does it look like when we're free from the structural barrier of racism? And I forgot to mention that we also held a community symposium to do that. Nothing as extensive as y'all, Stephanie, but we developed a healthy, healed community wheel. That's what does it look like when we're done on the framework of TRHT. And then we launched the Central Texas Coalition for Racial Equity. So the Health Commons is one of the co-founders of a now 30 organization plus movement. That's everything from our City of Austin Equity Office to Austin Community College, educational institutions, Bank of America, a lot of different levels and types of grassroots organizations, corporations, city government, local and county coming together to build a movement with the vision to have a community, a Central Texas free from the structural barrier of racism. So I forgot to mention that, but that's happening in our community.
That's incredible. I'm so excited to know about that, because when we get inquiries about what, like, how can we do this in our community, I have someone to send it to. Like, we're very localized right now. So it's awesome to see how you've expanded and incorporated more places, and also, you know, kept things like outside of silos, like reintegrating the business and the nonprofit world and the community service together.
Right. We did the regional is because of gentrification and the patterns of displacement. Because even if we'd say Austin, well, Austin used to be this little, 500,000 people, but as it's grown, the Black and brown people that were originally displaced to Central East Austin now are having, for economic displacement, to move out into regional areas, Buda, Bastrop, Del Valley, Round Rock, beyond that. And so really to be in all of our community, it requires a regional effort. And yeah, direct anybody our way. We're happy to share whatever we can.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question that wasn't on the list. I hope that's okay. But I'm just wondering how participants come to you, and if you've noticed any specific like demographic of people who engage in these healing circle, the narrative circles. Open to either.
I'm not on mute and you are, so I'll go, Stephanie. People come to us in different ways. If we have a partnership with the YMCA is amazing because they already have a diverse group of members, and lots of people come. because YMCA is a familiar place and racial healing is not a familiar practice or concept. So that is always a challenge. Like, what is this? And is it very woo-woo, or is it very white-centric, or is it, am I going to be called out in a way I don't want to be called? It's many, many fears. So one is through our partners. The other way people come in is, a certain following we may have, or you put out flyers and do promotional work and people get engaged. We historically have made some mistakes in our organization. We need to hire a community organizer and be on the ground more, because to connect with Black and Brown communities that have been impacted and experienced so much, the personal and on the ground connections are so important. And we have not accomplished that yet. And so we've done a lot of publicity through email and social media, and we really have to work to balance our circles and make sure that it's not too heavily white, because it's something of more interest that's more accessible when the ways we've put it out. So, but when we do things in partnership, we are definitely more balanced. But I don't know if that answers the question.
It very much does, because I think, at least for me being a complete newbie to the TRHT in the past year, I just assume, like, do people just sign up like on a list and it's like group therapy or something? So it's just like really helpful to understand for somebody who has like not a whole lot of extensive background on this framework of how it typically comes about. Sorry to interrupt, Stephanie.
Yeah, so ours, I think, has been a lot of people who do racial justice and social justice work who have been harmed by racism and are sort of in that immediate need for healing. We open it up to our community, and a lot of our supporters are like other nonprofit employees or community partners. And then the ones that we do that are in our racial equity cohorts are, again, specifically and intentionally mixed of, board members who in Dallas traditionally typically are, white, a lot of times white males, and then leadership, also very white in Dallas. And then it's typically people of color that are doing sort of the groundwork. I would say that we have not had as much success bringing in sort of the people that might not think they need racial healing, that might think they haven't been impacted by racism or haven't caused overt, racism. And we need to do a little bit more intentional recruitment of that. And that's sort of the idea with the business cohort. It was a paid model. They had to commit to wanting to learn and do better and, make an investment. And a lot of our business cohort are sort of more white and non-people of color.
Thank you both for that. Relatedly, how can people who aren't super familiar with this support your mission? And I'll leave it to you, Stephanie, first. Like, for instance, how can we implement some of the practice we learned about today in our everyday lives if we're not aware of racial?
I encourage everyone to model the framework in their everyday life. So learn the history of your people in the place that you're at. How has racism impacted you and where you live? And learn that and teach that and talk to people about that. Because I think it's the relationship building and the racial healing is really hard if you haven't reached an agreement on the truth about the harm that's been done. And so that's what's really challenging is you get into spaces and you want to heal and share your story about racism, and you're met with, well, I'm not racist, or my parents weren't slaveholders, so why am I here? And when you sort of learn that history and how racism has been so insidious and it is so systemic, it makes that relationship building a little bit easier, because it puts us all in, we've all been sort of designed to be separate. And how do we build relationships to bring each other together? And then the equitable policies and practices, what are the choice points that you can make in your role and in your work? So not everyone is an executive director or a decision maker in their organization. You might work at a company that is not doing racial equity work, and you feel like you can't do that, but you have choices even every day. What do you post on your social media channels? What businesses are you supporting? Who are you volunteering your time with? What does your social circle look like? What are the small changes that you can make to sort of leave a ripple and to model for other people? But the biggest thing for me is learn. I'm still learning. I learn something new about Dallas history and the history of racism and Asian American history every day. And every day it makes me more angry and sad and motivated to do what I do.
I think I'm going to ditto everything Stephanie just said and say also it's so individualized. So based on your personality and your inclinations, learn, absolutely. And how do you learn? You can learn, there's lots of books that have been published in the past, but more and more right now on racial equity. What does it mean to be right? Robin DiAngelo and so many others, Ibrahim Kendi, and there's many. So read if that resonates with you. Be in real relationships with people who look different than you. A lot of times, for Austin, it's a very segregated city. I-35 was built in 1928 due to a master plan by the city, made one side white, the other side black and brown by force. And people that are white and live on the west side, that segregation in neighborhoods still exists, except now Central East, which is gentrifying, and some other gentrifying areas. But people don't always realize, oh, every single one of my friends is white. Oh, every single one of my teachers and colleagues are white. It's like I call it a collective amnesia. People aren't having any awareness. And what I heard Stephanie saying was live consciously. And same for Indians. I'll associate with Indian. If you're going to do that, how are you going to understand people that look different than you and then come to understand you share the same humanity, though you have different behaviors and patterns? So, and then attend racial healing circles, do the small acts of racial equity and kindness toward humanity, like Stephanie said, and contribute to organizations that do the work that we're doing.
A follow-up question is, I think the theme is there needs to be, at least right now in the racial healing network or systems, a kind of intrinsic motivation. And so I think when we find like such anger and injustice at these injustices that we see, especially as we learn more about like the history of where we're living, we could lead to a lot of stress and anger. So I wanted to ask like how you take care of yourselves while engaging in this work. And I'll start with you, Dr. Amina.
I love that question. I've had a daily yoga practice for over 20 years. I thank my mother for introducing me to that when I was about 6, because she did it every day and I just wanted to be near her. I meditate every night, and I like meditation because I call it clearing our container. During the day, we pick up so much junk, thoughts, argument, or something didn't resonate, or some toxin. You close your eyes and it's like I'm dumping it all up. And then you sleep peacefully and you wake up and it's a new day. I love to dance. I feel that dance allows you to enjoy the vibrancy of being human in life. I love to walk at the river. I'm a mom. My son and I do the most amazing laugh sessions at night. And sister friendships. I love my sister friends. That's the best talk therapy ever.
Stephanie, I also know that you are really active with your yoga as well. So what can you share with us?
A lot of my self-care practices have come as a result of the pandemic. I think it forced me to slow down and realize that I could not continue at the pace that I was going without being burnt out and without it impacting my health. And so I was introduced to hot yoga through my significant other, and it became a really important way for me to even just not have my phone in my hand for, you know, a significant amount of time. And then for me, it's been about feeling strong, like remembering the strength and the resilience that I have to fight this sort of relentless racism that I face. And it's also been remembering just the things that bring me joy. This work is really hard, and sometimes you feel like enjoying your life is somehow a betrayal of the work because there's people that aren't given the same opportunities as you. And so it's intentional reminders that this work is in vain if we can't believe that we all deserve joy and happiness and peace. And so it's like, what are the things that I loved to do when I was younger before I realized how ugly the world can be? And music, writing, video games, sort of just, I just kind of let myself feel what I need at the moment and indulge a little bit. And like I said in my Instagram, Korean barbecue, I was adopted. And so reclaiming my heritage and my culture has been an ongoing struggle for me. And so anytime that I can reconnect with my roots and remember the strength of my ancestors, that helps keep me going.
Had a related question, but sorry, I lost it. Okay, so something that Dr. Amina's mentioned a lot is this tie between mental health and emotional health and physical health. So I was wondering if you had any tips for like people who maybe don't, or like for me, I'm like, I'm always too busy. I don't have time. Like I have a lot of other things that I need to do. Do you have any tips for prioritizing physical health for people who might not see it as a priority?
Yeah, I was one of those people. I did not like working out. I considered myself sort of lazy. So it's been important for me to reframe it as a positive, like asset-based activity. I am not just working out because I want to lose weight or I need to do this. It is because I deserve to feel good. I deserve to be healthy. I need to be healthy to do this work and to sustain and to live and to thrive. And so I look at it as a privilege to be able to take care of my body and have the energy to do this really hard work.
I think it's exactly that. It's what is your commitment in the world? What motivates you? Is it to raise your children beautifully? Is it to create a health center? Is it to, build your own business? Any of the things that a person is out for in the world, hopefully each person has taken time to think of what that is, what you're out for. And then no matter what, your body is your vehicle to accomplish that. Your mind is, like I say, central processing unit. It's a tool, your intellect, to achieve that. And so fine-tuning your body and keeping it balanced and well and clearing your mind, that's all essential to helping you fulfill on your purpose. And if you don't do that, well, today it may not affect you. It will catch up with you. So it's being focused on your commitment and then knowing that these are your vehicles, kind of like Stephanie said. In the immediate, it's harder. That requires a little bit more of a vision, because sometimes in the prioritization, we prioritize, I got to get this done, and then everything lapses. So I think there's a mindset. You have to understand that these things will conk out and you will suffer the consequences of it. And you just have to understand that and then commit to the care.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Because, there's been a lot of studies in psychology about how trauma is stored and it can pass from generation to generation. So there's definitely your body holds on to stress. And I think the book, like The Body Keeps the Score, has been pretty popular, but it goes into that a lot. So I appreciate the thorough answers that you both provided in terms of that. Just to honor the time, I know we are at 8 p.m., but I just wanted to ask if you had any concluding remarks, anything you would like to highlight about your organizations or your personal work. So I'll start with you, Stephanie.
I think one thing I really wanted to touch on is beyond self-care is the need for community care and to take care of each other. Sometimes self-care, definitely the self-care in the commercialized version, like bubble bath world, that's not accessible to everyone, has sort of, we've lost sight of what it really means. And self-care in the time of the Black Panther movement was, to give yourself the resilience to withstand racism and to withstand the work that you have to do. Sometimes that's hard to do. We're used to helping other people and not asking for help. So a lot of it is looking to what your community needs. And like Dr. Amina said, your sister friends, who's in community with you that you see is struggling. And instead of just asking, is there something to do that you can do to help, offering help, saying, I know that you are like balancing motherhood on top of this. Can I bring you groceries? Can I send you DoorDash for dinner? With our work, we prioritize taking time off. So my executive director took a sabbatical at the end of the year last year. We actually have somebody on sabbatical on hiatus now because we just know you can see when people are getting close to getting burned out and are not able to feel like they can step back. And so sometimes it's offering that for them and creating that space. So modeling that for people. And that's my parting thought.
In my family, my son and I, we say the world is our village, and we have to make the world our village. I think what I would say is a plug and an invitation to help us in Austin, Texas, create the first whole person health center that's community owned. And we're about to launch, we got our building permit and we're doing site development on this health center. And we'll be doing an investment crowdfunding to raise $1 million on WeFunder, launching this fall. And this is our ultimate sustainer for the community work, is a thriving health center. And it's the place where we want to embody the change we wish to see and to be in the world. So you can write to info@Karisha, KARISHA.org, or go to our website, www.karisha.org. It's where we're putting a lot of our attention right now. And I'd invite people to own great East Austin real estate while launching a movement toward conscious health and healthcare.
Thank you both. I wish I could selfishly talk to both of you for so much longer. I really appreciate all the time that you've donated to this conversation, for your intentionality and for everything that you've done to help us with this project. And I know that Chef Anna's like not here, but here. I just want to thank everyone who's contributed to the tote project as well. So Cow Noodle Shop in Dallas, Ulam Dallas with Chef Anna, and then the Boba Plug, and then also the Austin members, Gambe Gals is a collective, and they do pop-ups that are Asian themed based off of their heritage. And then also Con Trang, who owns Greater Goods Coffee Roasters, who's just consistently always giving back to the community. And one of her businesses is located in East Austin, and she does a lot to give back to the community and uplift local organizations. So I'm just so grateful for everyone. If you are interested in buying a tote bag, so that the proceeds will go to Stephanie's organization, Dallas TRHT, and then also Dr. Amina's organization, Austin Health Commons, please do so. Check out the Set Supper Club Instagram for more details on how to purchase. But yeah, that's everything I have. Any last comments?
Namaste. I bow to the universal presence that's in you, that is in me, and that it's in all life.
Namaste. I cannot wait for Korean barbecue with you, Hannah. Thank you for holding this space.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Korean barbecue. food. makes
Stephanie, you inspired me to go take a bubble bath. Like, I'm going to take a bubble bath right now because you
Good.
said it.
You deserve, treat yourself. If I had a bathtub in my apartment, I only have a shower. So I'm just gonna like put a foot soak together and put some Epsom salt in a bucket.
That works.
Good
Well,
night.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.